You ever build something with everything you've got, only for someone to try and steal it right out from under you? My name's Louis Frenchman, and I just lived through every car lover's worst nightmare. I spent months restoring a 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, a masterpiece I brought back from the dead. But my HOA president, Karen, decided that because it sat in my driveway, it somehow belonged to the community. She tried to tow it, claim it, even destroy it. But what she didn't know was, this time, she messed with the wrong guy. Let me start from the beginning. Tell me, where are you watching it from? I am Louis Frenchman, and I've always believed that old things deserve a second chance. Maybe that's because I never really got one myself. After a messy divorce and a job that barely paid the bills, I packed up everything I owned, moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, and decided to finally chase one dream. I'd been putting off my whole life restoring a classic car. Not just any car, though. A 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. I found her, sitting in an abandoned barn, 2 counties over, covered in rust, dust, and raccoon tracks. She looked like a forgotten ghost of a better time. But when I laid my hands on that faded silver hood, I could feel something like she was waiting for someone to believe in her again. I hauled her home on a flatbed, parked her right in my driveway, and that's when I met Karen, the HOA president, and possibly the most judgmental person I'd ever encountered. She came marching over before I'd even unstrapped the car, clipboard in hand, wearing that frozen smile that could cut glass. "Mr. Frenchman," she said, glancing over her sunglasses, "this vehicle doesn't appear to be in operational condition. HOA guidelines prohibit the storage of junk vehicles in plain sight." Junk. That word hit harder than she realized. I kept my cool and said, "It's not junk, it's a project. I'm restoring it." But Karen wasn't the kind of woman who understood patience or passion. She only understood control. She gave me a tight smile and said, "Well, I hope you plan on restoring it somewhere else. This community has standards." Then she strutted back to her house, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the garage, staring at that old Rolls, imagining her in her prime, chrome shining under the sun, engine humming like an expensive secret. I promised her I'd bring her back. It wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about proving something to myself, to Karen, to life itself, that I could still build something beautiful from the ruins. Over the next few weeks, I worked every evening after my day job. I cleaned, sanded, polished, and cursed more than I prayed. The neighborhood kids would stop by to watch, asking questions, while the old-timers nodded approvingly. But not everyone was happy. Karen walked by every other day, snapping photos with her phone like some HOA paparazzi. She claimed it was for record-keeping, but I knew she was waiting for me to slip up. Then one morning I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my garage door. "Unauthorized vehicle restoration project in progress. Must be removed within 10 days. I laughed out loud. 10 days? I hadn't even finished the bodywork. I tried reasoning with her, but she just quoted the HOA handbook like it was scripture. I thought about giving up, but when I looked at that Rolls, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just fixing a car anymore. I was standing up to something bigger, a system that crushed individuality under the weight of fake perfection. And that's when things started to get really strange. The next week was a battle between sweat, rust, and paperwork. Karen had apparently decided I was her new personal project. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel her eyes from across the street, peering through those spotless windows. One morning, I caught her pacing around my driveway with her clipboard again, like she was inspecting a crime scene. When I stepped out, she jumped a little, pretending to admire my mailbox. "Good morning, Mr. Frenchman," she said sweetly. "Just doing a community walk." I looked at her, then at the clipboard full of pictures of my car. "You really like that clipboard, huh?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. "I just like things to stay compliant," she said. "It's what keeps our neighborhood looking perfect." Perfect. That word again. The whole street looked like a postcard. Identical lawns, matching mailboxes, houses painted in the same shades of beige. I guess my half-restored Rolls-Royce was the only splash of character left in the place. And to Karen, that was unacceptable. But I kept going. Every evening after work, I sanded down rust, replaced panels, and rebuilt the engine piece by piece. The smell of old oil and metal filled my lungs like perfume. Sometimes, I'd lose track of time until the crickets started singing and the streetlights flickered on. That's when Karen started taking things up a notch. She'd leave anonymous notes on my porch. The HOA has eyes everywhere. Property values are dropping. We warned you. Always unsigned, always typed. One night I heard something outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw a flashlight moving near the car. My heart stopped. I rushed out barefoot and caught one of Karen's HOA enforcers. Some guy named Brad, snapping photos of my license plate. "What do you think you're doing?" I yelled. He looked startled, stammering. "Just checking compliance for the board." Compliance? At midnight? I stepped closer and he backed off fast. The guy practically ran to his truck and drove off. I knew Karen had sent him. The next morning, she called a special HOA meeting about me. I showed up, grease still on my hands, wearing a faded work shirt. Karen sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. "Louis," she began with that fake smile tone, "we've had several complaints about an unsightly, non-functioning vehicle being restored on your property. It's against Section 7B of the community guidelines." I looked around. Half the board members wouldn't meet my eyes. The other half looked bored. "That car isn't unsightly," I said. "It's history. I'm restoring it to its original condition." Karen leaned forward. "This isn't a museum. This is a residential neighborhood. Then maybe you should remember that residents are people," I said. "Not robots." That got me a few chuckles from the back, but Karen's face turned red. "You have 10 days left to remove that vehicle," she snapped, "or the HOA will take further action." I left that meeting, furious, but more determined than ever. Every night after that, I worked longer. The car started taking shape. The chrome gleamed again. The body looked alive. For the first time in years, I felt like I was coming back to life, too. But on the 10th day, just as I tightened the last bolt on the engine, a tow truck pulled up in front of my house. Karen was standing on the curb, arms crossed, smiling like she'd already won. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked toward the tow truck driver, trying to keep my temper in check. "You're in the wrong place, buddy," I said. The guy was a big, bearded man who looked more confused than confident. "Got a work order from the HOA," he said, holding up a clipboard. "Says to remove an abandoned vehicle from this address." Abandoned? I laughed so hard it startled him. "You see me standing right here, don't you? Does this look abandoned?" Karen strutted over like she owned the place, her perfume announcing her before her heels did. "Louis, this vehicle has been deemed community property under HOA Clause 11C, she said smugly. "Since it's been stored on visible property for more than 30 days without compliance, it now falls under our jurisdiction." I blinked. "Community property? You've lost your mind." "Watch your tone," she snapped. "The board voted this morning. This car will be impounded until you pay the fines and comply with HOA standards." It was surreal. She actually thought she could take my car. I stepped between her and the Rolls-Royce, spreading my arms. "Touch this car and I'll call the sheriff." Karen smirked. "Oh, please do." "The law is on our side." So I did. I pulled out my phone and called the county sheriff's department. The tow truck driver looked nervous now, glancing between us. A few neighbors had gathered, whispering, recording on their phones. The whole scene looked like a suburban standoff. When the deputy arrived, Karen practically ran to him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man has an unregistered, non-compliant vehicle." "Hold up," I interrupted. "That's my vehicle. I have the title, registration, and insurance inside." The deputy turned to me calmly. "Can you show me the paperwork?" I brought it out, title, receipts, even the bill of sale from the guy I bought it from. Everything was in my name. Karen's face began to crack like cheap makeup. "But it's against HOA policy," she hissed. The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, HOA policy doesn't override state property laws. You can't seize someone's car." Karen looked like someone had just told her. Santa wasn't real. But the rules don't trump ownership," the deputy said. "If you try to tow this car again, you could be charged with theft." I couldn't help smiling. The tow truck driver muttered, "Guess that settles it," and climbed back into his truck. As he drove away, Karen stood frozen, fists clenched at her sides, face red as a stop sign. When the deputy left, she turned to me and hissed, "You may have won today. Louis, but this isn't over. That car doesn't belong here." I leaned on the fender and said, "Neither do tyrants." She stormed off without another word. For a few days, things got quiet. No letters, no meetings, no complaints. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally backed off. But that peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, I woke up to find something strange. The garage door was half open, though I knew I'd closed it. My gut twisted. I rushed inside and found the Rolls front emblem snapped clean off. The Spirit of Ecstasy statue lying broken on the floor. Someone had vandalized her. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. And deep down, I knew exactly who was behind it. I just stood there for a long time, staring at that broken emblem in my hand. The Spirit of Ecstasy, symbol of grace, pride, and timeless beauty, now lay snapped in two. It wasn't just a car ornament. It was a message. Someone wanted me to know they could reach into my garage and violate what I loved most. And in this neighborhood, there was only one person bold and bitter enough to do that. I took a deep breath, grabbed my toolbox, and resecured the garage. But this time I installed two motion-detecting cameras, one facing the driveway and another hidden behind a flower pot near the entrance. I didn't tell anyone. Not a soul. I wanted her caught red-handed. The next few days, I acted normal. I waved at neighbors, nodded at Karen when she passed by, even complimented her roses. She seemed thrown off by it, like she couldn't understand why I wasn't broken yet. What she didn't know was that I was watching, waiting. 3 nights later, around 1:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the live feed, and there she was. Karen, in her pink robe and slippers, sneaking into my driveway with a flashlight and a camera. I watched her kneel down beside my car, snapping pictures of the license plate and the wheels. Then she pulled out a small spray bottle and started misting something on the paint. My jaw clenched. The next morning I went out and saw a streak of white residue running down the side of the Rolls. Paint stripper. She was trying to ruin the finish. That was the last straw. I printed the footage, downloaded every frame, and went straight to the county sheriff's office. The deputy who'd come before recognized me right away. "Back again, huh?" he said. "Let me guess, HOA trouble?" I handed him the flash drive. "You could say that." When he saw the footage, he whistled low. "That's criminal mischief. Maybe even vandalism." A few hours later, 2 patrol cars rolled down my street. Karen was outside clipping her hedges when they stopped in front of her house. I'll never forget the look on her face when the deputy approached and said, "Ma'am, we need to speak with you about a property damage complaint." Her lips trembled. She looked over at me, but I just stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing. They didn't arrest her on the spot, but they did file a report and issue a formal warning. That meant it was on record now. The mighty HOA queen had a stain she couldn't scrub away. That night, I worked on the Rolls again, feeling lighter than I had in months. The sound of the wrench clicking, and the faint smell of motor oil. It all felt like therapy. By sunrise, the engine purred to life for the first time. That old V8 rumbled like thunder under the hood. I almost cried. After all the nights of sweat, noise complaints, and harassment, it was alive again. But peace still didn't come easy. The next morning, I found an HOA letter in my mailbox, this time written in cold legal language. Due to continued noncompliance and community disruption, the HOA board is filing a civil claim for property violation and damages to neighborhood reputation. They were suing me. Karen had escalated it to a full-blown legal war. When I first read that letter, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so Karen, suing me for damaging the neighborhood's reputation. I didn't even know you could sue someone for that. But I wasn't backing down. Not after everything she'd done. I gathered every document I had, the title, repair receipts, violation notices, and most importantly, the footage of her vandalizing my car. I even printed screenshots of the community forum posts where she bragged about teaching me a lesson. She wasn't just obsessed with control, she wanted to humiliate me. A few weeks later, we ended up in small claims court. The courtroom was small, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and Karen sat across the aisle in a neatly pressed suit, surrounded by 2 HOA board members. I represented myself. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, looked between us and said, "Let's keep this civil." I wanted to laugh at that, but I bit my tongue. Karen spoke first, delivering a rehearsed speech about neighborhood values and visual harmony. She described my restoration project as an eyesore that had devalued the surrounding homes. She even claimed multiple residents had suffered emotional distress from seeing an old vehicle being worked on daily. It was so ridiculous I almost expected her to produce therapy bills. Then it was my turn. I stood, cleared my throat, and handed the judge a USB drive. "Your Honor," I said, "before we talk about distress, I'd like to show what really happened." The video played on the screen. Karen sneaking into my driveway at night, spraying chemicals on the Rolls-Royce, snapping pictures, then running off like a thief. The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face drained of color, her jaw tightening as whispers filled the room. When the footage ended, I said quietly, "That's the president of the HOA." The judge leaned back. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, addressing her by name, "care to explain this?" She stammered something about evidence collection, but it was too late. The damage was done. The judge dismissed the HOA's claim immediately and instead fined her personally for property damage and harassment. He even ordered the HOA to issue me a written apology for the unlawful towing attempt. Karen didn't look at me once as she left the courtroom, her face stiff with rage and humiliation. A month later, I stood in my driveway, polishing the Rolls-Royce. The car gleamed like liquid silver under the afternoon sun. The engine purred smooth and steady, better than it had in decades. A few of the same neighbors who once avoided me came over, complimenting the car and asking for rides. One even admitted, "You made this neighborhood feel real again." That meant more than I expected. As for Karen, she resigned from the HOA presidency 2 weeks later. Word got around that the board forced her out after the lawsuit fiasco. I didn't celebrate. I didn't have to. Her silence was enough. That evening, I took the Rolls for her first proper drive. The wind slipped through the open window, the engine humming like forgiveness. I passed by Karen's old house, empty and quiet, and smiled to myself. Sometimes revenge doesn't come from shouting or fighting. Sometimes it's just the sound of a restored engine, echoing through a street that once tried to silence you. I parked the car, turned off the ignition, and whispered, "Welcome back, old girl." And for the first time in years, I felt free.